This will be bottle 6 in the sequence of designs that I'm demonstrating. This particular one's going to have a handle, a through handle that's cut all the way through. There are many ways to accomplish this. This particular tutorial, I'm going to talk about sculpting my bottle shape with the idea of putting a handle through it and then literally cutting a hole through and then integrating that into the handle design. So I have a sequence here to start with to build the bottle. So all the way on the left is the completed bottle. So we can see where we're going with this. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm not doing anything unusual design-wise. It's pretty straightforward. Just has a radius corner, and we have the handle up at the top, sort of oriented on a 45 degree. And then the rest of the bottle is pretty straightforward. So I have my nice soft edges so we can get out of the mold. I have a ruled surface that I'm integrating as I'm building this bottle. So there's the label area for that ruled surface. And I'm not doing anything with the closure. I'm just putting something there as a placeholder. Okay, so when doing something like this, where we're trying to design the bottle of the shape to accommodate the handle, we just need to keep track of certain things like the thickness and the width of the handle, because I'm not going to build the handle separately and then add it to the bottle. I'm going to integrate it. So it's very critical that I start to think about the proportions and the size of that handle as I'm building this. So I'm starting off with lofting a surface, which will be the first step here. Well, actually, I'm going to start off with doing my layout. Let's start with that. Just my construction lines. So right here, I have a width I'm picking. The face is going to be slightly less than 6 inches. I think I'm like 10 inches high, roughly 3 inches deep at its max. So I'm starting to pick those dimensions, and I know I'm going to have this corner here. I'm going to radius that out. So I'm picking a radius that represents the total width of the bottle, and I'll just use that one corner to cut it out. And I'm starting to think about where my handle is going to sit. This will be made in the next step, but I need to know where I'm going with this handle. So I'm picking some dimensions. Roughly, handles can be about 1 inch thick, inch wide, approximately, give or take. Depending on where it's going to fit and how large it is. And then the clearance of the inside of the handle could be, 3.5 to 4 inches. 4 inches is very generous. So I'm starting to lay this out. This might change as I move along, but I'm getting ready to figure out where that's going to be. So I know that this top corner right up here on the top right needs to be thin enough. So I can, when I push my handle through there, it'll work. So step one. So if we go back over here, I'm going to loft this front shape. And then all I really have to do is trim it and then mirror it to the other side, which is the sequence I have here. So talking about the lofting. And again, this takes a little bit of time. It's a little bit of back and forth to get these dimensions right. So here's my lofted shape. And I went back and forth to try to get this top corner. You can see how it's blending way over to the side here because I want to trim that and I want that to be thin enough to accommodate the handle. So these are the sequence of sources that I came up with. So I started off with this curve at the bottom that represents that front curve of the surface. And then I took it and moved it up to the top and I moved it around. I angled it back, got this corner on the top right here and pushed it way over. So it's very tight and close there because that's where the handle is going to be. And then I know I want a ruled surface in the bottom half of the bottle. So I just added these two sources here and they're on this angle. So my ruled surface will go higher on the left-hand side than the right side. Ruled surface is for my label. And the reason I have these two tight to one another is so when I loft that, my surface will come up straight up to that point and then arc in gently. I don't want an edge there. I want that to be a nice blend. So again, a little bit of trial and error to get that to work. So these sources, when we string these together, give us that nice front panel. Let's select these in order. And again, if we look at this from the front or top view, all of these points are on a plane. I want that all to line up perfectly. So I had to independently scale them a little bit. I don't want one shorter than the other because I'm going to trim this and I'm going to use the edge from this lofted surface as the edge of my bottle. I'm not trimming the entire part. So I need that to be accurate. So that takes a little time. So I selected those and I'm just going to go to my tangent loft. Don't need caps. Medium resolution is fine. So there is that shape. So I have this nice straight leading edge that's perfectly straight because my sources all line up. And then I'm have this curve back in this back corner. So from the front view, this is going to look like just a perfect rectangle. And there it is. That's perfectly straight up, nice and parallel. So all I want to do with this is trim that corner. And I have that from my layout lines. So all I did was take this one line and just trim that because I have it perfectly lined up and everything is nice and square. So all I had to do is select the source and trim it with that line. And that gave me that nice radius corner there. So to test this out and make this work and build the rest of the bottle, I took this source and I just mirrored it to the other side. So now I have that exact same surface on the other side. Now I want all my draft angles and these subtle curves on the sides of this bottle and the top. So I went back to my layout lines and you can see I created this other line here, these lines that are slightly outside. I think I probably only did about 1/8 of an inch or so. It's about 1/8 inch outside. This is going to be part of my lofting of all the sides because I do want this to have some draft angle. I don't want it to go straight back. I want to be able to get it out of the mold and I want a nice soft shape. Didn't go too soft. This is more of a mechanical solution. So again, once I have that made, I can now loft these lines. So if I select this, I'm going to lines now, not objects. If I did object, it'll select the whole thing. I just want this edge. So I'm going to do that by selecting lines. So I selected this leading edge. I select the one in the middle and then the back leading edge. And then, sorry. Come on, you. Front edge, middle line, back edge. Again, using the loft tool, I can create these sides. So now that blends very nicely. You can see it's an arc. It's a subtle curve, which gives me my molding area. And the parting line would be right in the center. So all I did was did that on all of these, all around the entire bottle. And that gives me all these surfaces. Now the bottom is completely flat because we don't want any draft angle on there. So we're going to probably put a push-up or a punt in the bottom. So this will stand very nicely. So the bottom is perfectly flat. So all I did was selected all these sources now, these lines that have been created. And I just moved them over and copied them and joined them all together and then put that back. So I have created that surface at the bottom. These are all separate surfaces. So what I would do at this point is take all of this and you can union it together. Make sure you have a nice clean part and start experimenting with the radiuses. So that's the putting together the bottle. So once I have this and I'm happy with some of these distances, now I need to check to make sure my handle is going to work. So like I'd mentioned, I'm going to keep this all in one layer and I'm going to just bring forward the piece of geometry that I want to work with into this next phase, which will be creating the handle. So here in this right position, I have the front surface, and I took the back one away because I want to punch out this hole for my handle. So from the geometry I had created on that first level, I had built these two. This larger curve with this back curve, that's going to be the actual hole in the bottle that I'm going to cut through. So I have enough generous space there so I can radius that and it'll still fit. Again, that takes some guessing and estimations and a little bit of back and forth to get that correct. And this other inside line, that's the line I'm going to use to loft. So now I'm lofting in the other direction so I can get this out of the mold, just like this back edge is going to get out of the mold. And you'll see what that looks like in a moment. So I took, I'm looking in the back here inside. So I took these bigger edges and I trimmed the bottle. It's hard to see, it's in there. I trimmed that hole. So now what happens is once I trim that, I need the lines on the other side. So if you select that surface that's been trimmed, let's see, mirror, go to lines. So I have that surface in the front. I'm just going to mirror it to the back. So now I have the front lines for the handle, and I have the back lines, and I have that center shape that I'm going to loft to. So I have that off to the side here so we can see what those parts look like. Normally, I might just do this right on the bottle, but I pulled this aside so we can see this geometry. So that what I'm selecting right now, that's the cutout opening from the front surface. And over here, that's the cutout opening from the back surface. And then I have these lines in the center, which are flat, and I'm going to loft to that. So we'll look at that from the top view. So here on the bottom is the lines from the front, and those are the lines from the back. And in the center, it's completely straight. So just like when we lofted the side of the bottle, we're going to do the exact same activity, and we're going to get a shape like this. So I have these are connected. So let's go to lines. Let's take these three in the back. So if I select this one, the center one, and then the one from the other side, and again, it's lofting. So now I've created that surface. And it has a nice, a generous amount of curve. I did that so when you get your hand in there, your knuckles aren't in the way. And aesthetically, it just looks much more inviting, with a pretty drastic curve there. Not a minimal curve like I did the side of the bottle, because in here, this is where the hand needs to fit. And then I would do the same thing with these three to create these shapes. And then I bring them back into the bottle. And then we have all of these surfaces. Let's make sure. Okay, this I've joined. So I put those surfaces that I just created, put them back in the bottle, and then stitch the whole thing together. And then, of course, after I'm done with that, you go into your selection tool. You can go to Inspector, and under Info, it says Solid. Always check that, because sometimes I've stitched things and it's not quite a solid. There's a problem. So that's a nice solid, so I know I'm in pretty good shape. So the next exercise is to start radiusing these details. Now, again, radiusing solutions can vary. Like I wouldn't just click on the entire bottle and go radius everything 1/4 inch, because I might want to control some of the radiuses in different ways. So you can radius things in a different order. So we'll just talk about that a little bit for this bottle. So you can see here I started radiusing. I wanted a nice generous corner on all of these outside edges. So I did those probably inch, maybe 3/4 or even half. It's hard to say. Let's test one here. So all we have to do is select that and go to round. Probably a half. Let's see. Yeah, that looks about, oh, it's a little shy. I probably did 3/4. I could have made that adjustment while it was still selected. Yeah, so that was 3/4 of an inch on that outside edge. So it looks about right. Okay, so I did that on all the outside edges, and you can see I also did the inside of this handle. I wanted to start to do that because once I do that, I can then select this entire sequence and do that at a different radius. I wanted that inside one to be a little bit larger. So I did the outside corners. I have obviously I got the radius by the handle, and I'm looking at my handle, and it's looking pretty good. It's a pretty good size. I'm going to do some radiusing here, as you can see off to the left, and those radiuses will actually give me more clearance. So that's a little bit of a guess when I'm building. So I have these radiuses in here pretty tight. So let's select this line sequence, which is that whole sequence there. Since I put a radius in there, and I can now select that. I probably, looks like I probably did around 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, that looks about right. So that's coming up. See how large it is inside? Because that was a sharper corner in here. So it's fitting that. So it's going large, even though it's all 1/4 inch, it's larger on the inside and then getting smaller out here because the surfaces, when they come together, are creating different angles. And sometimes the program will have trouble figuring that out, but that worked out really well. So that reduces some of that material in there and makes that handle a bit more grippable. So that worked out really well. And obviously, I would do that on both sides. And this outside sequence, let's see how I did this outside part. Since I have the radiuses in the corners, I can select that as one sequence. That actually looks a little bigger. Let's see what 1/4 inch looks like. Yeah, it went a little bigger. Let's try 3/8. Yeah, that looks about right. And I just made it. Quite often, it won't go over another radius because the solution might not give us good clean geometry. So you can see those radiuses are really, really close here. And I have just a little bit of surface left. But this is quite nice. So this handle will be very, very soft. There won't be any hard edges. It'll be very round because of all this lofting that we've done. And it looks nice. It's quite strong. Yes, it is getting a little wider at the top and at the back, but it'll be a nice strong handle. Some handles are just a little too thin and you don't really feel like you have a good handle on it. So that's how all the rendering worked, the radiusing worked. And then the final part was the label. And again, this was planned. So I knew I had this ruled surface. So over here on the right, you can see that label area. So like I had done before, I selected that front surface, which is over here. And you can see that little tiny piece of material that was around the handle that came with it. But I don't want that whole top part because that's a compound curve up there. I can only do my label down here at the bottom. So all I did was take this line, put it on an angle, the angle I wanted. I don't know exactly what it was, and trimmed that part. So then I have this piece here after I trimmed it, and I have radiuses at the bottom because that came from the bottom corner of the bottle. I have not created the tolerances. Like I had mentioned before, the labels, we need a little bit of space around a label. So the label equipment has room. I'm not going to do that this time. I just want to show, the main thing was to show the handle here. So I'm leaving this full size. It's a little bit too big and it'll go right up to the radiuses of the bottle. It'll look very nice. Production-wise could be a problem. So by trimming that, I get this label area on the left. So as I had mentioned before, we need to radius those corners. So what I did was I created an extrusion out of that label. So then I had a solid and I could select those two corners And I could use my rounding tool instead of the fillet tool. And then once I created that radius I liked, I just selected the surface and I have my label area. So all I had to do is put that in position in front of the bottle, and this is done. And there it is. And I have a nice ruled surface. So that's just how to cut a handle into a bottle and integrate it into the shape. So again, this bottle is approximately a little over 2 liters. So it's relatively heavy. It's not huge, but it could deserve a handle. So that's it for this bottle. I will do another much larger bottle, probably around 5 liters or so, and show a different way to create a handle.